The people you trust most are the ones who can hurt you most. It's quite a statement to start with, isn't it?
It really is. It grabs you. And it's right at the heart of law, too, from the 48 Laws of Power.
Exactly. The law. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. We're doing a deep dive into that today.
And, straight away it sounds, well, almost paranoid. Be wary of friends. Use enemies.
Right. But it's not really about being paranoid, is it? It's more strategic, understanding how relationships actually work when power dynamics are involved.
Precisely. It's less about personal feelings, friend versus enemy in the emotional sense, and more about the roles people play in situations involving influence or hierarchy. Think work, business, creative projects.
Yeah, those contexts where objectivity matters. So we're not saying ditch your friends.
So not at all. It's about awareness. Recognizing that the very nature of friendship, the emotional connection, can sometimes be a liability in certain scenarios.
Okay, let's unpack that. What's the core danger with friends in these power situations?
Well, the essence of it is that friendship runs on emotion, right? Affection, shared history, a sort of baseline goodwill. That's great personally,
Sure.
but professionally, or when high stakes are involved, that emotional lens can, well, it can cloud judgment. Friends might get hired, promoted, or trusted based on warmth, not necessarily proven competence.
Ah, so the bias is baked in.
Kinda, yeah. And there's another layer, familiarity. Friends can sometimes feel entitled, or maybe they assume the usual rules don't quite apply because of the personal bond.
Right. They expect a bit more leeway, maybe slack off on a deadline, thinking, oh, they'll understand.
Exactly. And that erodes professionalism. Now, contrast that with someone who is maybe an adversary, an enemy in the book's terms, who you bring over to your side.
Okay.
Their loyalty isn't assumed. It has to be earned. They often feel they need to prove themselves, to show they're reliable, to overcome that past opposition.
So they might actually work harder, be more loyal in a practical sense.
Often, yes, because their commitment is based on demonstrating value and earning respect within the new dynamic, not just coasting on past affection. Earned loyalty versus assumed loyalty.
That really flips the script on how we usually think about building teams or alliances. We gravitate towards people we like, people we're comfortable with.
We do, and that comfort, that familiarity can make us less critical. You might not vet a friend's skills with the same rigor you'd apply to a stranger. You think you know them.
But you might only know the personal side, not necessarily the professional capabilities under pressure.
Precisely. And psychologically, we tend to wear rose-tinted glasses with friends. The halo effect. We might overrate their strengths and ignore weaknesses.
And the opposite for enemies.
Yeah, the horn effect.
Yeah.
We might exaggerate their flaws and miss potential upsides or genuine changes in their position. Our own biases get in the way of clear judgment.
Which leads back to that quote you mentioned earlier, something about betrayal.
Ah, yes. It's powerful. We expect betrayal from enemies. That's why we prepare for it. We don't expect betrayal from friends, and that's why it hurts more.
Oof. Yeah. That surprise element is brutal.
It really is. And history is littered with examples. Take Michael III, the Byzantine emperor.
Okay. What happened there?
He had a very close friend, Basilius, grew up with him, trusted him implicitly. Michael promoted him rapidly, gave him immense power and influence.
Sounds like a good friend to have, initially.
Initially. But Basilius, being treated almost as an equal, started seeing himself as an equal, or maybe even deserving more. That closeness bred ambition.
Don't tell me.
He ended up orchestrating Michael's murder and seizing the throne. The very friend Michael trusted most became his downfall.
Wow. So the lesson is be careful elevating friends to the point they see themselves as your peer or rival.
That's a key takeaway. Blurring those lines can be dangerous. Or, look at a more modern case, Steve Jobs and John Scully at Apple.
Right. Jobs brought Scully in from Pepsi, saw him as a mentor figure.
Exactly. Trusted him. But when their visions for Apple diverged and the pressure mounted, that friendly dynamic shattered. Scully was instrumental in the board decision to oust Jobs.
So even the strong, seemingly mentor-mentee relationship couldn't withstand the power struggle.
It shows how high stakes and differing ambitions can just dissolve those personal bonds. Friendship isn't always armor against self-interest in those arenas.
Okay, so those are the cautionary tales. But the law also says, learn how to use enemies. How does that work? The Lincoln example comes to mind.
Yes, Lincoln's team of rivals. It's a fantastic illustration. He deliberately appointed his main political opponents, guys who had fiercely campaigned against him, to his wartime cabinet.
Which must have seemed crazy at the time. Why bring your critics right into the heart of power?
Well, Lincoln was strategic. He knew they were talented, ambitious men with strong viewpoints. He figured it was better to have them inside, contributing, where he could manage them, rather than outside, sniping.
Keep your enemies closer.
Kind of. But it was more than just watching them. By including them, respecting their perspectives, even when they disagreed, he actually harnessed their opposition.
How so?
Their debates forced stronger policies. And because they felt included and valued, despite their initial opposition, they eventually developed fierce loyalty to Lincoln and the cause. Their loyalty was earned through respect and shared purpose, not prior friendship.
That's fascinating. So incorporating diverse, even opposing views actually made his leadership stronger.
Absolutely. It created balance and a more robust foundation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring this down to earth. Think about a typical workplace scenario today. You hire a friend to join your startup, or maybe they join your team on a project.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Seems like a good idea, right? Someone you know, someone you trust.
It seems like it. But then familiarity creeps in. Maybe deadlines get a bit fuzzy, or they question your authority, perhaps unintentionally because, hey, your buddy's outside work.
And confronting them is awkward. Super awkward.
Totally. You risk damaging the friendship, so maybe you let things slide, but that leniency can demotivate others, hurt the project, and slowly build resentment on both sides. The loyalty you assumed was there starts to fray.
Okay, so this isn't just ancient history or CEO-level drama. It's relevant day to day. How do we actually apply this, say, in 2025? In business, for instance?
Well, the clear advice is, be incredibly careful hiring friends. If you do, you need ironclad clarity on roles, expectations, boundaries, written down, ideally.
And vet them properly.
Absolutely. Vet them at least as hard as you'd vet a stranger.
Mhm.
Maybe harder, because you need to consciously fight your own bias. Focus on competence for the role, not just comfort with the person.
And respecting the hierarchy, the professional structure, has to come first.
It has to, over personal ease or history. Now, think about the creator economy. Lots of collaborations happen between friends.
Yeah, YouTubers, podcasters, artists working together all the time.
Same principles apply. Get expectations in writing, deliverables, timelines, how you'll handle disagreements or feedback. Because feedback's a big one here.
How so?
A friend might take constructive criticism really personally. It feels like an attack on them, not the work. Someone you have a purely professional relationship with, they're often more objective. They see it as input to make the project better.
So sometimes collaborating with someone neutral or even a respectful critic might give you more valuable, growth-oriented feedback.
It absolutely could. They don't have the emotional baggage. They're focused on the output. It forces you to raise your game.
And on a personal level, how does this using enemies idea translate without sounding, well, ruthless?
Think of it less as enemies and more as constructive opposition. People who challenge you, who have different perspectives. They aren't necessarily adversaries to be defeated.
Your resources for growth.
Exactly. They sharpen your arguments, force you to think critically, expose your blind spots. Growth rarely happens in an echo chamber of agreement. Learning to engage with disagreement respectfully rather than avoiding conflict is huge for personal development.
Okay, that reframing helps, but let's be clear about what this law isn't saying. We need some caveats, right?
Definitely. Crucially, it's not saying cut off all your friends or become a cold, calculating cynic. That's a misreading.
It's about balance and awareness.
Precisely. And it's not saying all former enemies are suddenly trustworthy. Some people are just manipulative, period. You still need judgment.
And loyalty is never permanent, right, from anyone.
I never assume it is. People change, situations change. The key is to cultivate healthy skepticism, meaning question assumptions about trust, not destructive cynicism, which just burns bridges. Pay attention to how people behave when power shifts.
But the DO side is also important. Learning how to potentially turn adversaries into allies can be incredibly powerful.
Yes, through finding common ground, showing respect, offering mutual benefit. Sometimes that converted adversary becomes your most steadfast ally because the relationship is built on proven value and earned respect, not just assumed affection.
You know, looking around today, especially online, you see this playing out constantly.
Oh, absolutely. The internet age thrives on collaboration, often between friends initially, but think about how many public fallouts start exactly there.
Yeah, YouTubers feuding, business partners splitting.
And online platforms can amplify everything. Sometimes the loudest critics end up getting more attention, more influence than quiet supporters. It's a very visible example of these power dynamics.
So wrapping this all up, the real strength seems to lie in that careful balancing act. Trust, but verify. Value friendship, but maintain professional boundaries.
It's about blending awareness with accountability, understanding the different dynamics at play in different relationships, and making conscious, strategic choices about who you rely on and how.
Your greatest threats can come from those closest. Be aware, not afraid. Test loyalty, don't just assume it. And sometimes,
Sometimes the best ally is indeed the one who once stood against you.
so here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Reflect on your own key relationships, professional or personal. Are you maybe over-relying on comfort and familiarity somewhere? Is there someone you initially saw as an obstacle who might actually hold potential as a collaborator or ally if you shifted the dynamic? Food for thought.
Definitely something to mull over.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Next time, we're tackling Law 3. Conceal your intentions power is a shadow game. Should be interesting.